Every Friday, we welcome our movie critic and reviewer extraordinaire, Tim Sika, to the After Party Live. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Kim. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Busy week. How was your
Yeah,
week?
I'm pretty good, I've got to say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
had back to school night. I had the Democratic National Convention to watch every night.
Oh, yeah, I watched it too. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
so good. What did you think?
Oh, I loved it.
Hmm.
Yes, it just made me feel great and it's been long in coming, Yeah, all
Yeah.
the speeches, everything. It was one of the best, I think one of the best conventions that I can ever recall watching,
You,
Democratic conventions. Yeah.
you know, one of the things that I loved the most was the roll call. I mean,
Yeah.
if that wasn't it was a dance off dance party. So much fun, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much different than what happened at the Republican National Convention. That I'm still feeling like on a high from all of it. So pretty good.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm glad I don't do political journalism. I passed on the Republican convention this year. I just
Oh,
couldn't. I just couldn't. It would have triggered me like way too much. So I
well,
just
I watched it all. I watched
yeah,
them both,
yeah,
to compare, and I want to know what's going on.
yeah.
Try to understand both sides of issues, but I have to say that the DNC was had a lot more spirit and I'll use the word joy because it really was
Yeah,
true.
right.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was off the
Yeah.
charts in that regard. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what do
I
you
loved
have?
it.
What do you have for
Okay.
us this week?
Yeah, I've got a few movies that are
Okay.
opening today. The
Okay.
first one on our list is something called Strange Darling.
Mm.
This is the first of two movies we're going to talk about this week that, amongst thinking audiences, may divide film goers. We'll
Yeah.
talk about the other one later, Blink Twice, but for now, Strange Darling, which is, to its credit, this is one of those movies that perhaps one of the most of these movies, these kinds of movies, that the least you know about the film going in, the better its effect on you. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, so the least said about the plot, the better. But what this is, pretty much, this is no spoiler because this is in the trailer. This is a serial killer movie.
Okay.
The story opens with that information on a scroll. We're told that this is going to be about a killer who, over like a 3, 4, 5 year period, started their killing spree in Colorado and moved their way to Oregon. That's all we're being told, right? It's less of a horror film. If it is a horror film at all, it's another one of those heightened horror movies we seem to be getting a lot of these days in movie theaters. Movies like Oddity and Cuckoo and others that we've
Yeah.
talked about. It kind of belongs in that class of quote unquote heightened horror, but it's really at its core a story about a serial killer, but also one that distinguishes itself from all the other serial killer movies certainly I've ever seen in its style, how its director, J.P. Molnar, is the guy that made this. He also co-wrote the script, is telling his story. And the way he does this is by presenting the various chapters of the movie. There are 6 chapters in this movie. He presents them out of sequence. It actually begins with chapter 3, then moves to chapter 5, then goes to chapter 1, then chapter 4, then 2, then ends with 6. So for the viewer, the movie becomes this series of surprises. It keeps you, guessing. The audience members definitely led to be thinking one thing when the truth of what they're seeing is another thing entirely. So it's
Oh.
immensely clever that way. And the acting is great. It stars Willa Fitzgerald and Kai Gallner, and it's basically a two-hander, but it's shot terrifically by actor Giovanni Ribisi. Who knew that this actor is going to ever shoot a movie? And it's just one surprise after another. It keeps you guessing. And on balance, if serial killer movies are your jam, I would wholeheartedly recommend that you check this out.
Hmm.
But in the end, I think all that this Strange Darling movie actually is triumph of style over substance. So rather, the movie is all style and no substance. It's unsavory, it's violent, and you go, okay, you put me through this, and why? To entertain me, obviously. But if this is like entertainment, I'm saying no thanks. I mean,
Oh.
and that's my taste. That's my personal preference. Being entertained by something as unsavory and unsavory is depicted in a movie like Strange Darling, it's like, ugh, and that's personal. I
Hmm.
left this movie, and I should emphasize again that it's a really smart one in terms of its craft and cleverness. But other than its craft and cleverness, I'm left with not much else. Say, in contrast to, oh, I don't know, a movie like Clockwork Orange, which is deeply disturbing and violent
Hmm.
and unsettling, but it leaves you with a lot to think about and analyze and talk about.
So you're
This
saying
one,
that if you're going to go through the kind of
yes,
the grit and
yeah,
put yourself through the
yeah,
dirtiness, that
there
there
better
better
be
be a
more to it.
right. There
Yeah,
has to be some type of substance or some reward for you,
yeah.
something, some moral message that sticks with you at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Better said that than I could have
No,
said. Yeah,
no.
and this one just was disturbing, and it just leaves you with like this feeling of yuck.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as a movie that will definitely keep you guessing, as a movie that's violent and smart in the way it's constructed and confident in the way it's telling its story, I recommend it. Horror fans and serial killer fans, I mean, there's probably a lot to groove on here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I personally just didn't like it. I'm glad I
Okay.
saw it, but it just left me with yuck and not much
Oh,
else. Even going over it in my head, and I take a lot of notes when I see these movies. I'm looking at my notes. I'm going, well, there's nothing here, and that just kind of confirmed how just I was just left with this feeling of yuck.
yeah.
It's
Okay.
getting great notices, this review. The critics are
Mm,
just eating it up. I can see why, but I don't know. And I keep saying this. I say this every week with you. Sometimes I just think, well, maybe I'm just seeing too many movies. Maybe if I took a year off and I saw this movie, like this was the first movie I saw,
mm.
I might really like not care that it wasn't leaving me with any kind of like message of any kind. But oh,
So
yeah,
this it sounds like this is not a movie for me. But if you like these kind of horror movies and gritty movies, then maybe it's for you. But this kind of thing, it seems like, if I'm guessing because I haven't seen this movie,
yeah,
is the kind of the reason I stopped watching shows like Criminal Minds. Because
yeah,
at the end of those shows, I just felt
yeah.
like dirty inside, like
It's interesting.
gross.
It's interesting too because I started watching Criminal Minds, and after about like the first, I think like the second season, I just thought, I don't
No.
want to put myself through this anymore. And
Right.
it's fine. That's really not a criticism of the show per se because I think that's what it's supposed to be doing. But
Right.
I don't know. I got enough like garbage in my subconscious. I don't need any
That's
more.
exactly
Sometimes.
right. Because you
Yeah.
carry it around with you, and I don't
Yeah.
want that in my head.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why would I want to have this in my head? And that seems
Right.
like a similar kind of situation.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm assigned to watch these things, so I'm doing it for a living. So,
You
but
gotta
I
do
mean,
it.
yeah, but no, I didn't enjoy it at all. But hey,
Yeah.
if anything of what I said sounds interesting to people listening, they may want to check it out.
Absolutely. Let's go to this one. It's called Between the Temples.
Yes, a comedy. We're going to cleanse the palate here for just a second
Okay.
before we get back into like a sick world. This is a comedy. It's called Between the Temples, and it's a good one. It's a welcome one too. Good comedies are not always the easiest things to find when you're watching movies, and this one's called Between the Temples. It's about a 40-ish Jewish cantor played by Jason Schwartzman. I didn't even recognize that it was Jason Schwartzman in the movie when I was watching it. I didn't look at the cast or anything ahead of time, and I went, "This guy looks kind of familiar," but he's gained a lot of weight for this part. Anyway, he's a
Is
cantor,
a
and he's having a
is a cantor like a preacher or a deacon?
yeah, a cantor is like a rabbi.
Oh, okay.
They preside over the Sabbath ritual in
Yeah.
temple, right? And anyway, he's having this crisis of faith. He's still in deep grief because his wife recently died, and he's just stuck there. And he literally loses his voice, literally. And cantors need their voices, obviously, to perform their duties because they do a lot of chanting,
Hmm.
during the service, and a lot of Hebrew prayers and stuff are sung. So he's really stuck. Anyway, he further finds his world kind of upended when his grade school music teacher, she's her head's upside down there. That's perfect. That's a perfect image for that. Anyway, she comes up to him, re-enters his life, and she wants, as an adult of 70 something, she wants to be a student of his, to have a bat mitzvah, which for
Okay.
a number of reasons she was never able to have as a young girl. So, and apparently, these bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs too for elderly people. They're doing the Jewish community is doing more of these. I don't know. That's another conversation. But anyway, so it's a story about the relationship between these two people of widely divergent ages. It kind of explores the complexities of belief, religious belief, and the Jewish faith, and the connection between these two unlikely people. It's also very quirky. It's very ethnic. It's very culturally specific. It's very Jewish.
Yeah.
And I was talking about style earlier with reference to Strange Darling. This movie, Between the Temples, is an example of style and using a style that it's very obvious, it's very stylistic, okay, but the style illuminates and informs the content rather than like what Strange Darling did, which to me was just style for style's sake, style tending to overshadow what could be interpreted as a lack of content. First of all, this is a funny film. It's a comedy. You laugh. Well, I laughed, but one of the reasons it was so funny, and what I loved most about the film, I love when movies do this, when they can combine style and substance. I mean, it was
Hmm.
funny because it poked fun at the Jewish religion and culture and the Jewish mother. They really satirized the Jewish mother by making the Jason Schwartzman's character's mother. He's got two mothers. He has lesbian mothers. So that's particularly funny. But anyway, but the style of this is very janky. It's kind of Shaggy Dog, visually kind of manic, but it also is sparkly at the same time. It's got these weird editing rhythms, but those rhythms and that style become a visual or a pictorial representation of the order of the characters' minds and what they're thinking and saying and what they were confused about and stuck in. In other words, the style always supported and underscored and amplified and illuminated the narrative. So this movie, Between the Temples, like Strange Darling, this too is a very stylish movie, but the style here never overtakes or becomes a substitution for the story. Usually when a film is this stylish, it tends to be, like it was in Strange Darling, more about style than substance. But in Between the Temples, that style worked hand in hand with a story that
Hmm.
had a lot to say and a lot that was going on in the background. Anyway, very funny film. It may not be to everyone's tastes. You know, comedy seldom are. I found it hysterical, and when a comedy makes you laugh, I mean that's the bottom line, right? But
Hmm.
in addition to this one is very human. I think anybody can relate to just what this character is going through in terms of loss and the loss of his longtime wife and the humor in that. Even though it's sad, there's still a lot of humor to be found in that.
Yeah.
But the characters are richly written. The performances are awards worthy. Carol Kane is terrific in this. So is Jason. And the direction by Nate Silver is top notch in all departments. So I
Wow.
can't think of a negative thing to say about this movie,
Wow.
Between the Temples. And it's funny. And it's funny. I like a funny movie.
Next one is called Blink Twice.
Yeah, okay. Blink Twice. This is another troublesome movie for a number of reasons. Oh, God. It's also a dark and unsavory one. It's a drama. It probably didn't help, Kim, that I saw this at the same screening where I saw Strange Darling. It was Strange Darling, followed by a short break, followed by this one, Blink Twice. So I'm going to try my best to be objective here, but I bet this one, on some level, was inspired by the Jeffrey Epstein scandal because of where it takes place. It takes place on a billionaire's island, and the Bill Cosby scandal because it deals with drugging and sexually assaulting women. But yeah, this one was directed and co-written by Zoe Kravitz, and it's basically about this billionaire played by Channing Tatum in the poster there, who we're told that he's like formally and publicly apologized for some kind of past behavior that we never really find out about. But because of his philanthropy, he's kind of managed to more or less reform his public reputation. But he also still brings women to this island, this secluded island, where he wines and dines them, gives them gifts, etc., etc. But of course, something darker is afoot. We kind of know that right away. I wasn't even sure how to look at this movie or how to receive it. It's the first theatrical film of its kind that I can recall that begins with an on-screen trigger warning
Oh.
cautioning that certain audience members may be triggered by some of the scenes depicted in the movie. I can see why they did it. I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Screenplay wise, the deck is like stacked. And by that I mean we the audience members are being deliberately set up for what we're about to see and experience because these women, you wonder why, well, why would these women who are meeting this rich guy for the first time at this like high-end cocktail party go away with him to his island so easily? Why are they so willing? Why are they so willing once they get there to give up their cell phones? Why are they so willing to do drugs when they're there? And why are they so willing to do whatever they're told? I mean, just about every, this may have been deliberate, but just about every image, every line of dialogue, every bit of insinuation points to the fact that something really horrible is about to happen. We're gonna watch this. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that something really horrible does happen on this
Mm.
island when these women get there. This is a movie that was obviously born out of the Me Too movement. It's a revenge tale, and I'm not really a fan of revenge stories. I do get the emotional satisfaction that comes from wanting revenge, but I question the wisdom of having and getting revenge being so much a part of one's movie plot. And that's just me. Okay, having said that, I think this movie works really well.
Mhm.
I just thought it was a really angry and ugly movie. I think it might be a movie that could possibly be therapeutic for some women who may have been sexually traumatized, but it's
Mhm.
awfully unpleasant. Many of the scenes literally horrifying,
Oof.
and that's obviously the point. Never boring for a second, but again, as entertainment, I'm going, oh, yeah. Do I need to see this? And I say this because I've seen a lot of movies covering the sexual assault of women by men. Many of them made my top 10 lists in various years, but there was something about this one where it felt like maybe it went too far or it
Okay.
crossed the line. I don't know. The jury's still out on that. I'm still kind of sorting that out. But yeah, what can I say in summation? It's obviously accomplished what it set out to accomplish in a powerful, strong, ugly, and angry way. But as a movie, it made it made Promising Young Woman, that Oscar-winning drama about a woman haunted by sexual trauma. It made Promising Young Woman seem like a Disney movie in comparison.
Whoa. Okay.
That's how strong and
Mhm.
nasty and angry and unsavory this movie was. But
Okay.
so I'm kind of recommending it, but maybe if I hadn't seen it right after I had seen the other one, the Strange
Oh
Darling,
no. It was
because I
back
saw,
to back ugliness.
yeah, back to back yuckiness, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I suppose I'm recommending it, yeah,
Okay.
but ugh, didn't like it.
Let's go to this. This is something that's streaming that you found,
Well,
and it's
yeah,
called Five Came Back.
yeah, I discovered this, Kim, by accident on Netflix when I was doing some research on the director of this movie for a piece I was planning to do on him, on the director of this movie, for a book he's just written
Okay.
about film director Brian De Palma. So it was by accident I found it. It was actually released in 2017, apparently, but I only now just stumbled on it. It's a three-part documentary series called Five Came Back, and it's about Hollywood and the Second World War, how Hollywood played a very specific part in that war in terms of propaganda and public morale and so forth with the making and distributing of their movies. But what was most interesting about this, because I love Hollywood history, was the story it told about how five very famous filmmakers, great filmmakers, played a part in the war by not only actually being in the war, they were recruited or they volunteered. Some of them were majors, some of them were captains, but making films about the war and documenting the war as it was happening. And those directors were John Huston, Oscar winner for Best Director for Treasure of Sierra Madre; William Wyler, three-time Oscar winner for Best Director for Mrs. Miniver, The Best Years of Our Lives, and Ben-Hur; Frank Capra, three-time Oscar winner for Best Director for, gosh, what film? It Had Happened One Night, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and You Can't Take It With You; George Stevens, two-time Oscar winner for Best Director for A Place in the Sun and Giant; and John Ford, four-time Oscar winner for Best Director for The Informer, How Green Was My Valley, The Grapes of Wrath, and A Quiet Man. Anyway, and the series goes into all of the politics of the time, how the fact that the lion's share of the moguls, the movie moguls in Hollywood, the movie moguls of the time, the men who actually created Hollywood, were Jewish immigrants, and how that affected the business of movies, especially the overseas business of movies. Remember, the war was us against Hitler and
Mhm.
anti-Semitic Nazi Germany. And it also goes into how the war experience affected the filmmakers and their subsequent work. It was, in fact, George Stevens, one of the directors profiled, and his crew who liberated Dachau and whose films of the atrocities uncovered there were used at
Oh,
the Nuremberg trials to convict
I
the
did not
German
know
war
that.
criminals. Yeah, responsible for the
Wow.
Holocaust. Yeah, so
Yeah.
those are the movies. Yeah, that was a Hollywood filmmaker that went there with his
Mm.
crew, and they were just shocked and appalled beyond imagination. Anyway, it's a fascinating story. It's based on a book of the same name by film historian Mark Harris. Steven Spielberg and Francis Coppola are among the directors working today that are also interviewed here because they're talking about these directors and their understanding of their work. And to anybody that's interested in film history, U.S. history, World War II history, this is a must watch. It's riveting from end to end. It's called Five Came Back. It's now streaming on Netflix, and there's even a follow up compilation also streaming on Netflix called Five Came Back: The Reference Films, which
Oh,
features all of the movies, the propaganda films that were referenced in Five Came Back. So you can watch all of those as well. That's a much longer watch. They have the Frank Capra did a series of films, propaganda films for the U.S. government called Why We Fight. You can see all those movies on this edition. You can also see all the films, the concentration camp films, which are
oh.
yeah. I mean,
But so
some of that
important that
footage
we
I've yeah. Go ahead.
important that the world has those videos, right? That we have that on
Absolutely,
tape, that we know,
absolutely.
because now you have people saying these things never happened. We have it on video. So
Oh
how
yeah,
amazing that Hollywood,
yeah.
directors were there, and that's the reason that we have so much information. Really, probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's just they felt the filmmakers of the time and mostly the population at the time felt like they needed to do something. They wanted to do something. And a lot of these guys were older. They were up in years, but they volunteered anyway, and they took their
Mm,
craft and what they knew and
yeah.
went to town and
Hmm.
did whatever they could. It's fascinating. I didn't know a lot of this history. I knew about Frank Capra, but I didn't know about Houston and Weiler and Stevens and Capra. Well, yeah, you knew about Capra, but I didn't know about the others
Oh,
and what they did for the war effort.
that's so
But
interesting. I had no idea about any of that.
yeah, it's very,
Yeah.
very interesting, and it's a really quick watch too. It's just three parts. I think it's about 3 or 4 hours. It was originally released theatrically, but I only heard about it like last week, and I
Yeah.
thought, wow, I wanted to watch it anyway because I'm going to probably talk to the filmmaker
Yeah.
about something else. But I thought, man, this kicks ass. This is
Yeah.
terrific. But yeah, so that's what I've been
Oh.
streaming this week.
All right. Well, let's recap it. We have Strange Darlings. You said all style, no substance. No thanks. No
Yeah.
thank you. You said that it's smart in craft and cleverness, but really not much else. And the word to describe this movie, a great big yuck. And I don't think you're
Yuck.
recommending that one at all.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
people can interpret
Yeah.
what you just said as they want to interpret it.
Between the Temples, you said it's a good comedy. The style is has interesting editing rhythms. You said it's got both style and substance, that it might not be to everyone's taste, but you found it really funny and worthwhile. You're
Yeah.
recommending it. Yeah.
Yes. Hmm.
And Blink Twice, you said this is a revenge story that while the movie works well, you said it's an angry, ugly movie with lots of horrifying scenes, possibly going over the line here. You're recommending it, but only kind of.
Yeah, I'm recommending it with reservations.
Mm-hmm.
I personally know people, friends of mine, who would not go to this movie just based on what I've shared with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think it was. I think to be fair, I think the film was deliberately made this way, the way I described, the way you just described, to make its
Mm-hmm.
point. So that's why I'm recommending it with
Yeah.
reservations. If you can handle it, check it out. Yeah.
And lastly, Five came back, this three-part docu-series on Netflix that was put out in 2017, but we just found it.
Yeah.
You say this is amazing. It's a must-watch if you love history, that it's not that big of a time investment, and you say go for it. It's on Netflix.
Absolutely. You did it
Nice.
again. You
You did it
summarized me
again.
perfectly. Yeah.
You're amazing. Yes, Tim Sika, you are awesome. Anything going on this weekend that you're doing?
I no, I may attend a film festival in San Francisco. It all
Okay.
depends. I mean, those things they're really time sucks.
Sure.
I don't know. It depends, but I'm going to try to do a little bit of chilling this weekend because
Okay.
it was a busy week. How about you?
I like it. Lots of kids stuff going on over here, so
Kid
that's
stuff.
the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
it
I've been
is.
seeing
Yeah.
some of your posts. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Tim Sika at the movies. We always appreciate you stopping by. We'll see you next Friday.
Okay, Kim. Have a good weekend. Talk to you next
Bye.
week.